Hello and welcome to Data Ki Baat. Ownership is not given, it is taken. Yes, so that is what we are going to discuss today on Data Ki Baat. And just to remind you all that we are talking about non-personal data governance. So for a quick recap, right, I would like to just walk you through some of the things that we have discussed in past, and that is around data trends, which is first chapter in the data governance, non-personal data governance report that we are discussing. This is the part 3 of the series, and we have talked about the data, non-personal data ecosystem, where we talked about various type of non-personal data. Now, today in this episode, we are going to talk about ownership. This is a big subject in itself, um, pretty complex. Not much clarity if you really see, because ownership as such, as I told, right, practically if you see, it is all about how self-motivated you are about your data, how you are not forced into certain, I would say, processes and policies, and then you are abiding by that. It is basically opposite if you really see. From data governance standpoint also, this is one of the topic. If you really talk to any data governance professional, they would like to talk about this topic. It is very near and dear to all the data governance people who are trying to implement, put data governance in place for the organization. It's all about people and how they are able to take the responsibility. So there is no difference when we are talking about ownership, whether it is a data or life, right? It is self-driven. You have to take it and then follow those, regulations or legal basis, if you talk about in terms of this particular report. So without any further delay, I will take you to the slide that I have prepared very quickly for us to be able to refer. We talked about impact, threat, opportunity, and access in terms in the context of non-personal data governance. There is economical, social, cultural impact, because we are talking about huge data sets and how it can be used for uh, public and social goods, and not only for the organization or the bodies who kind of use it, process it and generate some insight. So that is what we talked about. This is going to be a basis entirely, and as we discuss this, we have to remember these 3 4 things. Impact, it is going to you know create some kind of threat. At the same time, there are a lot of opportunity, and that is what we are trying to collectively find out, that what are the different opportunities that we can look at. Moving to the next one, I talked about supplier input, process output to create the value. I'll not walk it through today again, but yeah, I thought I'll remind that. And then 5-step process to create the value out of data. So you have to define, you have to measure, analyze, improve, and then keep on controlling. Look at those, thresholds, whatever it may be in terms of your data governance framework. Because I believe that data governance framework cannot be generic, cannot be one fit all solution. It is basically depend upon your context, your situation, your organization, or wherever you want to put this, right? So there is no generic rule as such, if you ask me. So quickly, we talked about 3 data types, categories: public, private, and community data. And then we also try to define that what is public, what is private non-personal data, and what is community non-personal data. So for today's episode, we are going to focus on um, ownership. And when we are talking about ownership, there comes the behind the scene. We are basically talking about roles and responsibility. So it is very good idea to remember that what are the different roles that we have talked about in the last episode. And that was data principal, data custodian, data trustees, and data trust. So keep that in your mind, and then as we move to the roles, it might be useful for us. So when we are talking about rules, when we are talking about ownership, right, and then we are talking about different roles attached to it, as you see, the data is not something that you can really hold. I mean to say, when we are talking about ownership, you certainly think in terms of something physical, something that you can you can feel, you can hold it, and then you know that you really own that, right? But in case of data, that's not the case. It's like you can't hold it. So that is what is going to make this much more complex. And since the report recommend this as a asset, in fact a national resource, it becomes even more important that how we are able to come up with some kind of a legal basis, some kind of a legal rights, establish some kind of a economical value, so that all the party involved are benefited, and there is no bias, there is no divide in place. So that is the whole idea and intention of putting this recommendation. As I have told multiple time and repeat, this is a draft report. It is not being followed yet. There are a lot of discussion happening, but the whole idea is that even if the new report comes, that's somehow gonna be falling into the same lines with various alteration, because a lot of people are getting involved. There is a ongoing campaign, or you can call it as ongoing ongoing report place where you can go to the data.gov.in and find out that how you can really give input, that what do you feel about this report and what are the different challenges or concerns that you have. So you can keep doing that, but for the time that we are going to see what we have got, there are a couple of key things that came up when we talked about data ownership. It's all about making sure that how it is beneficial for all the party interested and in that ecosystem. So when we are talking about public, um, non-personal data, then how are the different rights that gets involved, private, and then obviously community. So interest of individual and community, benefit to the community, and we are talking about how the roles or the bodies who is going to not control but regulate those are going to play that role. So with that, let's move on to the next slide, where we will go and look at the recommendation in the context of various non-personal data types that was defined earlier. So public non-personal data, as you know, it is all public effort. It is government and any government agencies involved with it. So what the report says is that since it is public, there is a public effort involved, then the whole idea of putting this rule was to consider and make it recommended to consider it as a national resources, while really thinking from the ownership and rights perspective. So even if it is non-personal, you know that there are it is publicly there are people involved putting effort and all of those. So if it is government and agencies who are there is a combined effort, then let's call it as a national resources. And when you talk about national resources, then obviously it becomes much more um, basically it is making it much more bigger, much more complex. But as you compare with the other resources, here we are not talking about resources which you can really physically feel that, but we are talking about data which is something which is intangible. So that's where a lot of discussion debates happening at this moment. um, Going back to the next one, which is community. And when you talk about community, naturally we are talking about a group of people with their common interest, their common goals, aspirations, and ambitions. Having said that, what happens when there are community data involved, and how do you look at that? How do you ensure that not a custodian in this case who would basically process that data, or the company, or the organization or private entity, uh, the data in fact is belonging to the community. It's their effort. So how do you make sure, or how can we make sure that they are also equally benefited? So that's where this term came, like beneficial ownership or interest. Basically, if you have gone through the personal data protection bill, you will see that keeping the interest of the subject, keeping the interest of the parties involved. So that is a core idea behind recommending this uh, for the data ownership in terms of non-personal data as well. So collective subjects are involved. So we have to also see that how how we can ensure their interest as well when we are talking about um, data ownership for the community data, in fact. So there are two terms which was basically a highlight was beneficiary ownership that I just talked about, and then data sources. Because ultimately, even if the community is involved, then there are, we have a data sources. We have to consider that from where it is coming. And then what are the different subjects? As I said, it is collective subjects, collect set of people working on certain things, and then producing that data. Uh, and then there is one thing that was really a highlight here is that how in this case when there are a lot of people involved, naturally in the community case, where is the governing body who will ensure that all of these legal basis or the rights or proposed rights are being kept in the best interest, and then benefits are being forwarded and shared. So that's where this representative bodies or data trustees comes into the picture. So that's where this report really highlighted that roles when we talked about the subject, which is principal, and data fiduciaries or custodian, and then we are talking about data trustees and data trust. So I'll talk about that piece as well. Moving on to the next type, which is private non-personal data. And as name itself implies, here we are talking about individual, and the people, and it is that really makes it lot more complex. But in terms of the recommendation, in terms of how to derive the legal basis, there are things that need to be considered. That it has to be really raw and factual data. It should not be giving anything like so that we can identify the person or the subject behind the scene. And then there is one more thing that came up is like those algorithms, those proprietary knowledge, all of those, basically the rule or recommendation keeps that out of the context. It's uh, not shareable or should not be shared. Uh, I have some thoughts around that, my personal thoughts, um, but how can we make that happen? Because even if it is a proprietary algorithm, what kind of a recommendation, what kind of a regulation can be placed so that that can also be probably used for the social good, given that personal the private interest or that subject interest is really kept in in the highest priority. And then next point, which was very much relevant, which I would like to highlight, is that over the time the value of data can go up. I mean, that's the best hope, because as the company or as the individual process, as the new algorithm is in place, as the volume increases, the insight may just differ. So if the value of the data increases over time, then there should be a provision to go and revisit that. Now where is that, how it is impacting the legal basis, how it is impacting the sharing, how it is impacting the rights of that particular entity over there, in the case of personal private non-personal data. Okay. So that gives us a overall idea of a data ownership, as I stated in the beginning of the call itself, that it is very complex because of couple of reasons. That data is intangible. It is not like a physical asset where those regulatory or those legal bases can be put very clearly. So there are a lot of fine lines, lot of basically, what do you call, since it is involving many parties, because I can probably create some kind of a data set and then say that it is my data, but then how do you make sure that my claim of owning it is protected? I mean, that's where this authority, that's where this legal basis, that's where this legislation and regulatory legality and all of those comes into the picture. So if you want to understand that why data ownership, why are we even talking about that, that's the very simple and easy way to get it. That, like, you own your house and you have a clear idea about those legality, those regulations, you abide by, you know that physically that's what you own, but in data case it is not the case. Hence, there is a need for a regulation which is acceptable, which really helps and keep the interest of all the party involved, because we are not talking about one person. In the case of data, it is like, I can use the data, you can use the same data at the same time, right? Or like many other people can use the same data. So and I can probably generate my own insight, but then I am saying that okay, it is my data, I did generate that, but where is the source, from where you got that on a data? So keeping the source in mind and keeping the subject into the consideration, and then coming up with fine balance of establishing the ownership is the goal of this chapter, if you really see from the government of India perspective. But if you come out from this, government, report and notion, right? In the data governance also, as a data governance professional, right? It is basically the same. You have to make sure that you identify the right people who can own that data, and they basically are self-motivated to sustain, to keep maintaining those data. We also have to consider that what kind of a position they have in the organization, because that's what gives them a rights, and basically power to ensure that he or she is keeping the data in the best interest of the company, in this case, organization. So it's all about roles and responsibility behind the scene. It's all about also those empowerment, the position of the person. So that's where all of this need to be considered when you are even talking about the ownership from the data governance perspective as well. So with that, I have come to a end of this chapter. Please post your question, and then as I keep looking at the report and coming up with each episode as a part of a small session, like 17 to 20 minutes, or a little bit more sometime. But yeah, a quick small session where I just go by the reports and what it kind of says and what I think, and then invite those conversation from you. So feel free to do that. One thing I wanted to share was that today Data Ki Baat live is broadcasting at two platforms. One is LinkedIn, and also on the YouTube channel, which probably people can always look at. I will share the link after this call as well. So keep posting your question, and then I'll take it from there. I think there is some question. Okay, George, my friend. So the value of the risk could also increase over time. Absolutely, George. Absolutely well said. As I said, right, I'm not even thinking that value will always increase. It might also decrease, and then obviously based upon what is happening, the risk goes up. So the next one that I have on my screen, I am not able to really see who is the user, but democratized versus monopoly in case of data ownership is much talked about topic. Considering the regulation and compliance, how can we label data for organization and personal uses? Great question. Democratizing is, you can look at that, country. I just go by the very simple example, and you can see that there is a challenges when we are talking about openness. There is a challenges when we are talking about democratizing. When there is a lot of challenge when we are talking about openly share. You look at the open data. I took example last time that how every government, almost every country, trying to put the effort to make sure that there is a openness in the data. But then with that comes the challenges, that how do you keep that updated, and then how about the early entrants who have basically gotten hold of a lot of data, and probably as you rightly said, created a monopoly. How can you create a environment, a startup ecosystem, or maybe a business, and that's going to be next topic, by the way, data business. It's a great concept that that is there in the report, which talks and which give. I like the term data business. Basically, it is nothing but a data economy, making sure that you are able to monetize data, and there is a provision, there is a rules around it, that how do you use it, and then who still owns the right, and all of those things, right? So coming back to this question, right, monopoly, yes, that's the whole idea. The idea is to address that divide. The idea is to address that monopoly at this moment, and then still ensure that there is a democratization in place, so that data is available. People are able to make use of that data, create those social and public good by providing services, by enhancing the existing services, by looking at the certain policy from the government side and see that, hey, it was probably making sense earlier, but data says that it is not making any sense now. Or maybe data says that we are not even close to the objective of having this policy or a program. Now let's do that and change it and then see what happens. So there will be a measurement system that can be developed to measure everything that we are trying to do for public and for government. So a lot of things can happen, but it comes with the cost, and that's where I will go with one of my earlier interpretation of this entire report. We are talking about impact. At the same time, we are also talking about opportunities. So we have to just balance it out. So that's where we will have to see that how we can ensure that there is a fine balance between who uses, and there has to be a legal rights and regulation and compliance in place. And with the personal data, I think that it's a subject in itself. I have done a lot of work in the personal data protection bill as well. I would probably share that, but I see there is a good connect between the non-personal data and personal data, because it is thoroughly inspired from there. It still talks about people behind the data. In this case, we are talking about non-personal data, but from where that data is coming, there is always a subject behind the scene. And what this report says that we have to consider that subject, we have to consider that source, and then try to see what are the different legal bases that we can put. So personal data is still a prime focus, and we are trying to ensure, or this report in fact is trying to ensure that that personal touch or the personal entity behind the scene is always considered when we are talking about this data ownership as well. There are 4 or 5 legal bases out there. How do you deal with the personal data? Similarly, there are a couple of rules inspired by that here in this case as well. So we can talk about that. We can probably revise that non-personal personal data protection bill as well. I think I did it last year, and the rule or the regulation is still not in place. It is still under consideration. So we are all as a country and looking at how we can have that rule for our country very soon. So with that, I'm not seeing any further questions or comment in this case. So I thank you for your question. The LinkedIn user here in this case, and my friend George Firican, thank you very much and for watching, and all of you, thank you very much for watching this show. I like really doing and bringing those subjects that can really be of some help to people. So keep giving your feedback. Let me know how are you liking it, or if there is any feedback from your side. I will implement that and then make this much better. And also let me know the different area and topic that you want to hear in this show. So thank you very much, all of you, for watching. Bye bye.